Good afternoon, Laredo. Welcome to another episode of the Texas Border Chronicles. This is a community affairs program with local community leaders discussing issues affecting the border area. Hi, my name is Jesus Chuigarza, your host today. We have with me my colleague Juan Rodriguez to my left. How are you doing?
I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here. Well, let me tell you, today's topic actually is about immigration and the virtual course that they just built. The Texas Department of Homeland Security just opened the newest virtual immigration center at the banks of the Rio Grande. With more than 1 million cases that they have pending, backlogged in immigration case, they built 5 new tents along the border, one of which came to Laredo, of which they spent $30 million to build, and they opened it just this week. On the first day, as you know, Juan, the agreement, or at least the settlement between both parties, between Mexico and the U.S., is that they now have the remain in Mexico policy, which is part of this thing.
Yeah, that's what is called MVP.
Right.
Remain in Mexico.
Exactly.
They're trying to discourage.
That's right. So they're discouraging the immigrants from being able to come over here. So the way it works is that the immigrants are supposed to wait in the Mexico side, and when their day of court is started, they're actually supposed to be on the bridge by 4 o'clock in the morning, 4:30 in the morning, and to wait 4 hours on the bridge while the court opens at 8:30. Then they have a court setting at the immigration courts here at the border from 8:30 to 4 o'clock. If they're unable to finish the actual cases, then they have to be returned to Mexico before 4 o'clock.
That's correct.
That's part of the Lopez Obrador administration, which agreed to do this.
Yes, yeah. 3 weeks ago, they make a deal.
Right, they made this deal, and so now they're going to have to stay there. Of course, the immigration, the Homeland Security has said basically that they have room now for about 400 cases to be heard on a daily basis in Laredo. And the way they've set it up, they have video conferencing between the immigrants and a San Antonio judge in San Antonio and the asylum seeker in Laredo through this tent cities, or the tent courthouse that they have here. We did try to talk to CBP about this particular.
Yeah,
we made attempts to talk to them, but they weren't able to get back to us in time for the taping. So we did make an attempt to visit with them. Of course, the lawyers are not happy with this system because allegedly they're having less time to talk to their clients and are going to go see the judge without them being able to talk to their particular clients in the defense. Now, as you know, this is part of what they call the Migrant Protection Protocol.
Yeah.
Right. That's really what they call it between Mexico and the U.S.
That's a pilot program.
Right.
I can say that it's not working at all.
Right. Well, it seems to be having issues. Maybe it's just because it's the start, or maybe because it's the reality. It wasn't really properly planned. Now, you had a chance to talk to Mayor Pete Hines.
Yes, I did. He made a lot of he saw all the as a whole.
They explained it to him.
And the expenditure that's being doing the federal government on this project, this program, is they're talking about $70 million.
Right.
And three
exactly.
water cities, including
El Paso, Brownsville, and Laredo. Now, we have a short interview with the mayor.
Yes,
is that right?
We have.
Let's go ahead and turn it on, and we'll be talking to you right on the other side.
I think it's a success because I think it's clear that they want to make it difficult for the migrant, for the asylum seeker to come and remain in the U.S. Obviously there was a loophole in the law, and this organized activity bringing migrants to the border was somewhat exploited, as we know, with associated dangers and risks for the migrants. So from that end, I think Washington has succeeded now from the standpoint of the migrant, and obviously sending them back and sending them back to an environment that is dangerous and not the best is somewhat highly questionable.
So what do you think of the mayor's interview?
He looks not happy. He's thinking about all the wasting money. Even he put in the table a good option like
El Portal. Well, they had an opportunity. The government did. Let's see if they pick it up at a later time. We're going to
Well,
take a short break at this time. We'll be right back with our next interview.
Serious car collisions require personal attention, an attorney who's experienced and can finish the case without referring it out. If you are involved in a serious car collision, call Joey Theas, because serious car collisions require a serious and effective attorney.
Welcome back to the show. We do want to remind everyone, actually this courthouse is only 20,000 square feet.
yes.
Just about.
And they're able to set up hearings for 200
Right.
people.
So,
They-
right. So that should be enough to handle 200, 250 people, but the reality of the matter is that the turnout so far has been low.
Very slow.
Well, what we're going to do is we're going to watch, I understand you talked to Congressman Henry Cuellar. What did he
Yes.
tell you?
Well, he's talking about also about the expenditures that this money could be saved.
Better, it could have been used in a better way.
And the better way is taxpayers' money. So he's very. It's
We're going to go ahead and watch that video, and then we'll be right back and talk about it.
You know, the MPP, as you know, we started off with the federal government wanted to spend all this millions of dollars, and they have spent millions of dollars on this tents that they have. The city, and then we set up a meeting with the city of Laredo, where the city was willing to go ahead and provide a portal for $1 for 18 months. But the federal government, the Trump administration, wanted to go ahead and literally start off with spending about $25 million. And if they stay here a whole year, it's going to be $75 million divided by half, because that's half of the cost between Laredo and Brownsville. They spend a lot of money, millions of dollars, potentially up to $75 million. And as I said last week, the visitors that came down from Washington, we probably were going to have more visitors than actually migrants that were coming in and asking for the asylum. You know, we're just seeing about half of them after they're given notice to appear. Half of them are not showing up. They're going back to mainly Central America, and the other ones are going to be coming back for a hearing before the immigration judge. That's the other issue. They're done video conference from San Antonio. I wish we had immigration judges here so that people could talk to those people personally.
So what do you think?
Well, he looks also very upset with the upcoming with this.
With the way the money was used.
It is spending, and I don't know what he's going to do. He's going to fight over there. At
Well,
the
really,
House.
it's going to be up to the government, because at the end of the day, it's President Trump who makes those decisions. We'll be right back, and we'll continue with the discussion with our panel.
Serious car collisions require personal attention, an attorney who's experienced and can finish the case without referring it out. If you are involved in a serious car collision, call Joey Theas, because serious car collisions require a serious and effective attorney.
Welcome back to the show. We're here with a special panel of experts, as far as I'm concerned, concerning the virtual immigration courts. We do have our associate judge, Nathan Shu. He's here. He's an attorney who actually has some experience about asylum seeking, and he'll talk to us later on about that. We do have our prior also associate judge, Salvador Ortiz, who's here, an immigration attorney for over 25 years, I understand. 40 years, excuse me. And of course, we do have our councilwoman, who's actually here as an immigration attorney, who has been practicing law for many, many years as an immigration specialist and attorney, of course. So welcome to the show. Really, the discussion today is about the virtual immigration courts. And I'll start with you, Mr. Tez. Was it necessary for the government to build these virtual immigration centers?
In my opinion, no. I think if the government really wanted to make this a humanitarian process, they could have paroled a lot of the people in, put them in what they used to call 40 years ago docket control, meaning that they would issue notices to appear and have the people report on a monthly, on a bi-weekly basis. And they could have even used the procedures that they were using recently within the last 2 or 3 years, where they were also putting ankle monitors on people at the aliens' expense if they wanted to be released. But they chose not to. And I think it's what they're doing now, it's a method to frustrate the applicant, get them very annoyed about what's going on, and then they give up and go back to their hometown.
Well, they have over 1 million cases that are backlogged. Ms. Vilma, you obviously were part of the city council, but really, as an attorney, you've seen a lot of these cases. Over 1 million cases we're talking about. This probably is the only way the government thought they could resolve this matter. I mean, could they not have resolved this other matter? I mean, is this still not a bad idea? It's still a bad idea?
Well, we've had a backlog since 2014 when we had the first wave of Central Americans coming. And so right now we have, I don't know how many thousands of cases waiting for November 29 of this year, which are also going to be
Well, there's over about
reset.
1.2 million cases backlogged.
This exacerbated the conditions that we already had for the backlogs of the court. So obviously they try to come up with a quick solution, but at what price? You're taking away a lot of the due process, and it's pretty much an unwelcoming face. That's what they wanted to do, because even though the city had offered the El Portal for $1 rent, what they wanted to show is like, this is a tent, you're not welcome, just, this is as far as you're gonna get to go.
Well, apparently the mayor said earlier that he was willing to offer that still to the government, but they're spending over $30 million just to maintain this facility for the next 12 months, at least.
Yeah, let's wait for a flooding season and see what happens, right? And they started this in Tijuana and Juarez, and then now Laredo and Brownsville, but they had a plan, and that is the project, and that's the facade they wanted to give. As far as whether or not it's welcoming, it's not a welcoming.
I'll ask you, Judge. Is there anything good that comes out of this?
Actually, there is no good that comes out of it. Mr. Thea said it correctly. It was just a way to frustrate people and to deter them and to get them to not come here. I mean, to set up situations where folks do not have due process, folks, to fill out that asylum form, it's pretty complex. The interview itself is pretty complex. And when you don't have counsel to advise them of what they were seeking under, 7 different criteria that they can seek under, and if they don't know that, and, we've seen horror stories of children 2-3 years old before the immigration judge in a hearing. I mean, how ridiculous is that?
Well, what do you do then? What do you do? You got 1.2 million cases pending. You've got a facility that takes care of about 300 to 400 people a day, Mr. Tellez. Do you think these people who are waiting in Laredo are going to literally wait for their hearing?
Well, based on the lack of public safety in Nuevo Laredo, I think you're going to be, you're not going to have the majority of the people waiting in Nuevo Laredo for security reasons. And those that do wait are going to be frustrated by the environment in Nuevo Laredo or any of the border towns along the border from Brownsville all the way up to Mexicali in Southern California. All the border region is not a safe place to be anywhere. You asked the question, is there anything positive that can come out of this? Well, let's talk about that. If we look at it historically, the whole immigration system is backlogged. The family-based immigration is backlogged by over 25 years. You can't immigrate if you're above the age of 21. It takes 25 years. The court system has always been backlogged to a certain degree, even in the 80s and 90s when we had the arrival of the Marielitos, and then we had other type of waves of immigrants. Right now, what we're experiencing, and this is what's frustrating, I think, the majority of the population in the United States, is that we're having people from the Western Hemisphere now coming. In the past, we had the refugee resettlement program of Southeast Asia after the Vietnam War, which was received very well by the public because we were making amends for having lost that war. If
Vietnam.
if we for having lost that Vietnam War, but now we're getting people from the Western Hemisphere, and there's a reaction to that. Nobody wants us here to a certain extent, but they ignore the fact that the United States depends on labor, depends on the people that are coming, and not everybody that's here is a political asylum seeker. Number one, I think that the upside of this is it's gonna force Congress to seek to reform the immigration laws. However, the question is going to be in what way? Is it going to be positive in a way to clear up the backlog of what's going on, or is it going to be reactive and put more restrictions on people trying to come in?
That's a very good point. I think that only the time will tell us. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back. We'll continue with the panel.
Hi, I'm Chelsea Fuentes. Let me show you what my brother and dad can do. They have a lot of experience creating videos that you will enjoy for years to come. As my dad always says, if it's not on video, it didn't happen.
Welcome back. We have our panel of experts concerning immigration and the virtual immigration courts in Laredo. We do have Judge Chu, who in fact is familiar with the asylum process. In fact, he was one of the was actually an asylum seeker many, many years ago.
Yes, I was of that wave that came through in the 80s that Mr. Theus has spoken about. We came through, left South Vietnam. We actually escaped by boat. We ended up in Malaysia. So what had happened is those countries at that time had something called refugee camps. So they're actual physical space that Southeast Asians can go to, and they would accept us. And based on those, then we would seek asylum, and then we would get our documents processed. And that asylum packet would go all over the world. So we stayed there about 6 months, and then after that they transferred us to Manila. And in Manila we waited about another 16 months.
So your trek is no different probably to others who do go through a dangerous journey in some cases.
Yes, ours was by sea. So as you've heard probably about the stories by sea during that time, it's pretty treacherous. You have pirates in the sea. You have folks that didn't know how to navigate the seas. There's been real bad stories about that. So we spent about 4 nights by sea before we made it to Malaysia.
Well, is there some comparison, Ms. Vilma, concerning those asylum seekers that are coming to Laredo?
Well, yes, there's a comparison. As far as the pirates by sea, we see a lot of cartel activity taking advantage of some of these asylum seekers. They're extorted, kidnapped, sexually assaulted. We've had cases like that, and while they're waiting the process, there's a lot of corruption sometimes, even in the waiting list. That people we try to be put in that waiting list by other means. The only other thing that we are lacking right now, we don't have refugee camps with these countries. Even though it's been identified as countries that are very, very dangerous. For example, in Honduras, there's like a 94% hike in femicides. So if you come seeking asylum, you have a lot of proof that all the murders that happen, yet we have the U.S. doing some third party or third country asylum, treaties with El Salvador, which is also with the whole gangs, Mara Salvatrucha or Calle 18, it's very dangerous for the people. The country doesn't have control. And so it's sort of what we see in Mexico as far as the gangs and things like that, the cartel control. So the asylum seekers are very vulnerable populations, and they're even put more at risk.
Right. Well, what happens then? I mean, this matter went before the Supreme Court recently, Mr. Tejas. The Supreme Court made some temporary orders allowing this remain in Mexico policy to continue in existence. How do you see that coming out at the end?
Well, the problem with the Supreme Court decision is that it totally ignored the international treaties between the countries as far as how they're supposed to treat refugees, in my opinion. If I may add to what Ms. Vielma said and what Mr. Chu explained about his experience, What happens is that the United Nations, through its High Command of Refugee Services, establishes refugee camps in third countries where it is recognized that people are fleeing because of political strife. The problem with the United States is that it refuses to recognize that the turmoil that is going on in Central America and even in Mexico, it is at the level of creating political strife and insecurity and instability of the government. And therefore, it refuses to recognize that. That's why they have a 95% denial rate on political asylum applications from all Central American applicants and on Mexican, and probably a 97% denial rate on Mexican applications for political asylum. So what happens here is that unlike Mr. Chu's experience where there were refugee camps, there are no refugee camps that are organized and manned by the United Nations. And at every refugee camp, every country that's part of the Treaty of La Hague in that regard has offices, consular offices, processing applications, and they vet people so who can enter the United States or they can enter into Great Britain or Canada based on how they vet the people and what the needs of that country are. And that is what is lacking in this particular situation. People are coming directly from Central El Salvador, Honduras, to the United States and skipping that intermediary process of being in a refugee camp because the world doesn't recognize what's going on in Central America as a problem.
But Mexico has a migrant camp in LAREDO. That does not qualify as a refugee.
The refugee camp, and don't say migrant because that's not the refugee camp.
That's what they call that.
Yes, I know, because they don't want to call it a refugee camp. It's a matter of semantics and politics. Once you start calling something a refugee camp, then you start saying there is a problem in the country.
Yes.
And it's a matter of the State Department using the buzzwords in order so they don't have to abide by the rules of the treaties that they're a party of. And in our situation right now, people need to understand that, for example, in Southeast Asia, they would have consular officers from the United States, Canada, Switzerland. Even the Swiss would what is going on is we need to have what they were doing with the Cubans during the 60s and early 70s. In the early 70s, where they would have the Swiss government processing people to come to the United States as refugees.
That's something that certainly that needs to be discussed later on. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back on our final segment.
At Laredo Independent School District, we recognize September as Attendance Awareness Month. As a district recognized by the state of Texas with 14 exemplary campuses, 13 recognized campuses, a post-secondary distinction, 2 early college high schools, and 2 blue ribbon schools, LISD is breaking new barriers every day to provide you with a strong path towards your dreams. Your daily school attendance is your first step in transforming your goals into realities. Be in school on time every day, all day.
School is where we belong! Laredo ISD is a place to be, where we are cultivating champions through education.
Welcome back. Again, we're talking about the asylum seekers' opportunities and chances of them being able to be brought into the U.S. and be accepted. Now, you've been an immigration attorney for many years. You know the process. You're familiar. All of you are familiar with the process. Congressman Cuellar just mentioned earlier that only 12% get asylum. The reality of the matter, we're talking about 1.3 million people. What are the chances?
The chances are very slim, as we were commenting in the break. That's 12% nationwide, but at the border, since you're looking only at the Central Americans primarily coming to seek asylum, we see denial rates of 95, 97% with the border judges because they become so desensitized of hearing the same stories. They're denying a lot of cases. One of the big concerns we have as advocates is the lack of due process. For example, if you have a client that's going to be in Nuevo Laredo or Reynosa, as an attorney, I wouldn't want to go risk to prepare the client over there. So we have to be a little bit, outside the box to try to prepare the client, be able to have the documents translated and be able to be ready. Now they want to fast track all of these asylum cases. But if they're busing them out to Chiapas or Monterrey, what we've seen is that half of the people that were supposed to come back to court are showing up because probably they don't have the money to come back or maybe they desisted. So the due process as far as, not having access to our clients and usually putting them in places where there's not a lot.
So that limited your way of...
That's limited, yes. And also you're kind of under duress. I mean, if you have to be there since 4:30 in the morning with your kids and crying and hungry.
Which is, I don't understand again, that's, again, and it's just not the U.S. only, it is also Mexico part of that process.
Yes, the waiting line is there in Mexico.
4 hours on the bridge with your children, 4 o'clock in the morning, and I don't know what security venue they have out there.
Well, they're doing a lot of security checks on our side, and that's why they have to be waiting in line so they can get processed and checked before they go. But there's a lot of reactive, as Mr. Tellez was saying, a lot of reactive measures that are being taken because of the crunch we have in immigration, such as the public charge. And we're seeing it more so in the consulates, for example, from worldwide, I guess, from October the 1st, the fiscal year, to July 29th. It used to be 1,200 cases plus that were denied. We're seeing 12,000 plus cases that were denied just in that short
Can you
period.
explain to the public exactly, what do you mean by public charge?
Public charge is, well, if it's in the consulate, the term is if you're likely to become a public charge, that you might use some of the means-tested benefits such as Medicaid, food stamps, housing. So it's worse when you go out, let's say, to Juarez. Right now, the last Lo que va del fiscal year, they've denied 5,000 cases plus. So if I'm a U.S. citizen and I'm petitioning my spouse, and me and my U.S. citizen kids use Medicaid, food stamps, or housing, that's going to affect me having been able to prove that I can bring in my husband. So this is affecting a lot of U.S. citizens that had the right to have these benefits. Now, it's going to start in the U.S. on October 15 of this year. Not to that extreme. It doesn't affect the U.S. citizen household, but it's going to affect another look at other factors such as age, employability, health. So it's kind of discriminatory. If you go to Juarez, let's say, and you're under 18 or over 61, you are likely to become a public charge right off the bat just because of your age.
Mr. Tellez, what are the chances of somebody be able to bring someone in if that issue is going to be right there in front of you?
Well, we have to acknowledge that when they try to apply the public charge, there's also the option of having a co-sponsor. And the co-sponsor has to really be someone that's solvent, has, for the last 3 years, income way beyond their needs under the circumstances. Now, we haven't seen it yet, and I don't want to jinx anybody, but I think what we may see on the horizon is that as a co-sponsor, I think the role of a co-sponsor has not really been given a serious look at, and you may see governments trying to recuperate public benefits from co-sponsors in the future. Up to date, I have not heard of that occurring, but that's something that could happen.
That reminds me a little bit about child support.
Yes.
Well, I want to thank you, the panel, for navigating through our show and through this, and I appreciate you all being here. I think immigration continues to be a big issue in Laredo, and hopefully we can do this show again on immigration because it's a topic that never ends.
It's a hot issue.
I want to also thank KGNS for allowing us to be able to do this show, and I want to thank you, the public, for being able to watch the show. Until next Saturday, we hope we added a little bit more information to what's important to all of us on the border, regardless of which side we are in terms of immigration. The community is always better off when we're able to provide them with more information and awareness of border issues. So again, thank you for your time and have a blessed weekend. Thank you.